Most of us have looked at an old family photo and felt nothing. A stranger in old clothes, a name on a piece of paper. But what if you could actually meet that person? Not a ghost, not a symbol, but a full human being with a face, a worldview, a set of rationalizations for the harm that they caused. And what if you could sit across from them and understand what they believed about race, about order, about who deserves what, and why those beliefs still echo in the world that you and I live in right now? That's what this series is building toward. And this part is the moment it gets personal. This is part 3 of Healing Your Own White History. And today is step 3, choose one ancestor to focus on. If you're just finding this series, parts 1 and 2 are linked below, but this part stands on its own. So let's get started. In parts 1 and 2, you were in learning and gathering mode. You built a historical foundation. You started a family line. You collected names, dates, and places. That work was important, but it was still, in a sense, comfortable. You were consuming information. You were building a map. Step 3 is different. Step 3 is the moment you stop consuming and you start acting. You're not researching all of your ancestors anymore. You're choosing one person, one story, one human being whose world you're about to enter. And that shift from overview to specific is where this process stops being abstract and starts being real. Before we talk about how to choose, I want to talk about something more important. Because here's what happens at this step that doesn't probably happen in steps 1 and 2. When you pick a name, a real person, someone connected to you by blood, the emotional stakes change. Up until now, you've been learning about American racial history. That's difficult material, but it's still, in some sense, out there. It's about the country, about systems, about history. The moment you write down one ancestor's name and say, this is the person I'm going to reckon with, it becomes about your family, about you. And that can bring up things that you don't expect. You might feel grief or shame or a disorienting mix of love and horror because you're going to discover, or maybe you already suspect, that someone your family cherished was also someone who caused serious harm. That's real. And it deserves real support. So, before you choose an ancestor, I want you to identify one person in your life, a friend, a family member, a therapist, a pastor, just someone who you trust, and tell them what you're doing. Not to get their permission, but just so someone who knows you is aware that you've started this work and can check in on you and be available when you need them. You don't have to do this alone, and you should not. And the further into this process you go, the more important that support becomes. If at any point this work triggers panic, intrusive thoughts, or ongoing distress, pause. Talk to your person, get the help you need, and then decide whether to continue. This is not therapy, but it can surface things that need attention and care. Go gently, get support, and then choose. Now, the other thing that stops people at this step is this. What if I pick the wrong one? I'll make this quick. There is no wrong choice. Every ancestor on your family line was living inside of the American story of race. Every one of them was shaped by the racial ideology of their place and time. You're not looking for the most important ancestor or the most guilty one. You're looking for one person whose story you can enter. And if you start and you hit a wall, pick a new one. The framework is plenty flexible. In the framework, I offer several ways to approach this decision, and here are the ones that I found most successful. 1, go with someone who you know the most about. Letters, a journal, a biography can all be gold mines. Even a photograph with a name on the back is someplace to start. More material is better, and it means more to work with in the next step. But even a census record and a birth date is enough to get going. Second, go with who pulls at you emotionally. Maybe you share their name. Maybe your grandparents talked about this person with love and pride. Maybe you look at their photograph and you see your own face. This emotional resonance isn't a distraction, it's data. It tells you this person's story has already been traveling through your family, and that makes them worth examining. Third, go with when and where they lived. What era are you most drawn to? Slavery? Look for ancestors in the 19th century South. Even if they didn't own enslaved people, they were living inside of a culture that was built on that institution. Colonization and indigenous displacement, then go further back, 17th or 18th century ancestors who arrived when that violence was at its most active. Closer to our own time, 20th century ancestors lived through Jim Crow, redlining, the racially exclusionary GI Bill, and the birth of mass incarceration. Sometimes nearer will hit harder. Fourth, I want you to consider gender. Some people find it easier to empathize with an ancestor of the same gender. For others, the opposite is true. In any event, your ancestor's gender will shape the story that you're stepping into, especially in earlier generations when prescribed gender roles and gender violence were more embedded. Follow your instinct. When I started this process, I had several ancestors I could have chosen. I chose Charley first because of the combination. I had more material on him than almost anyone else in my family line, and I felt a pull of him emotionally. Not because I admired him, but because my family had celebrated him. His name had been passed down for 5 generations, and my grandmother had centered her family scrapbooks on Charley and his descendants. That gap between the love my family showed for this man and what I was beginning to find out about what he actually did, that gap felt like exactly the right place to start. He was a slave trader. He was a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle. He helped build the racial hierarchy that I inherited, and my family called him beloved. That's the kind of ancestor worth sitting with. Here's what I want you to walk away from this part with: 3 things. 1, a name. After you finish watching this, pick one ancestor. Write their name down. Commit to it, at least for now. 2, your reason. In one sentence, write down why you picked this ancestor. Time period, emotional pull, a document you found. It doesn't have to be profound. It just has to be honest. 3, your first 3 research questions, not a full research plan, just 3 questions you want answered about this person. Here's some ideas to get you started. Where exactly did they live, and what was happening racially in that time and place? What did they do for a living, and did that profession exclude or exploit people of color? And what did their church, their community, and their culture teach them about race? These 3 questions are your bridge into part 4, where we're going to go deep on research, what to look for and where to find it, and how to build a real picture of the world that your ancestor lived in. That's step 3. One ancestor, one reason, 3 questions, and one person in your life who knows you're doing this. You've moved from a list of names to a specific human being. You've made a commitment. You're no longer just learning about racial history in the abstract. You're locating your family inside of it. And that's not a small thing. In part 4, we do the research. We figure out how to put yourself inside of your ancestors' world, their time, their place, their institutions, and their beliefs. If you want the full framework for healing your own white history, it's free on my Substack. Link is below. Pick the person, tell someone you trust, and I'll see you in part 4.